Hey, what's up? This topic I'm about to go over doesn't really get enough attention from folks, I don't think. And I think it should, because of all the conspiracy shit you hear about knocking around on the internet, this is the one thing that you can bet your ass is probably being used on you somehow, some way, somehow. It's really just basic psychology. It's just psychology. And so we're going to talk about mind control. And we're going to talk about 3 of the ways that it's been utilized and implemented over the last 70 years since World War II. We'll talk about technology, through cults, and with trauma. So here goes. Now, it all started after World War II when we discovered that the Chinese had developed a way of somehow programming our men who were POWs. These guys, they renounced their citizenship. They allowed themselves to be used in propaganda. They actually opted to stay over there when the war was over with. And anyway, people started to call it brainwashing. And that's, and it probably got started with the Nazis back in the concentration camps. And, of course, after the war was over, the Russians and us too, we grabbed as many of their scientists and doctors as we could. And the Russians probably got it from the ones they caught and used. But anyway, people were rightly afraid that it might be used on people here in the United States, and that they'd come in and infiltrate everything and infiltrate the government and, what have you. So anyway, that's where they got the idea for the movie Manchurian Candidate. And it's been made into a movie twice. The whole idea is that people might be used to do things, and they might not even know that they're doing anything until it happens, of course. Our mind control program started out as being called MK Ultra, and you might have heard about that. It was headed by that son of a bitch in the center named Sidney Gottlieb. He was a chemist, and in his research, he concentrated mostly on LSD. And, his idea was that he wanted to figure out a way to completely erase someone's mind, utterly erase it, and then replace it with, a mind that he would replace it with. And, replace it ex post facto. And, his subjects were unwilling, and mostly they didn't even know that it was being done to them. I personally know a guy who was given a massive dose of LSD when he was in the Army back in the 50s. He didn't know about it. They just blasted him with it. And he told me about that 40 years ago, before anyone even knew about MK Ultra, before the internet had even come along. So anyway, that guy, he was like the Papi Chulo of the whole movement, the mind control movement. It was a movement to control your mind. So anyway, let's continue on. Okay, and then the guy down in the lower right, Ewan Cameron. He was a psychiatrist. He was the former head of the American Psychiatric Association. And he was famous for torturing folks psychologically. And he used LSD, he used electroshock. He'd put people in sensory deprivation tanks for months at a time, put people in comas and leave them blank for months at a time, hoping to be able to erase their minds. He was a devil. He was a son of a bitch. And he was the head of the American Psychiatric Association. Just look him up. Look that motherfucker up. I dare you. And then the guy in the left is Julian West. I misspelled his first name. It was Jolyon West. Everybody called him Jolly West. Back in the early 50s, he came out of nowhere and was just made the head of psychiatry at the University of Oklahoma, just out of nowhere. And then later on, he pioneered all kinds of brainwashing techniques and the use of LSD in particular. He's gonna pop up again in the video, big time. He just also happened to be Jack Ruby's psychiatrist when he was waiting in jail after he shot Lee Oswald. Gee, what a coincidence. Anyway, the unholy trinity of American mind control. You have it right there. Okay, I found two methods by which technology could be used to influence your behavior. One is subliminal mind messaging. You're probably familiar with that, most people are. And then there's another one, a little known technique called brainwave entrainment, which you can find all over the internet. I had never heard of it. But anyway, basically, brainwave entrainment tries to change the wave pattern, the frequency of your brain waves through external stimuli such as flickering lights, speech, music, or tactile stimuli. In essence, by using these techniques, they can produce an altered state of consciousness. And let's see, then there's subliminal mind messages. Yeah, there's an example there on the Skittles wrapper with the word sex spelled out. And if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't notice it. There's stuff like that all over the place in advertisement. It's everywhere. But here's a neat little video I found from a channel called TruthStream Media, which everybody ought to check out. It's absolutely top-notch. But anyway, let me start here, and I'll play this for you. It's really kind of telling.
The inspiration for the 1980s John Carpenter movie, They Live. Take a look.
Our national anthem.
Did you see the letters change at the bottom? Let's watch it again in even slower frame-by-frame motion.
Oh, Lord. Heaven help us. Okay. And it's like she says here in the video, you probably won't hear it, but she says, well, subliminals, they say they don't work, but so what? They were still trying to do it. Doesn't that reflect a certain attitude? But let's go on to further on in the end here, and let's take a look at this.
This guy, Hal Becker, by the way, founded a business out of Louisiana called the Behavioral Engineering Center. So just think for a second about what that means. Without trying to make this long video even longer, Becker has co-authored several papers and used to work directly with a neurosurgeon named Dr. Robert G. Heath. Heath, in the 40s, was researching ergot with the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, and by the 50s, he was doing psychosurgery and the implantation of electrodes to stimulate certain areas of a person's brain and control their moods and behavior using radio frequency. Was definitely on the record an MK Ultra doctor. A lot of those records were destroyed. there's not a way to prove everybody's involvement, but he's the whole time that Dr. Heath and his team, the whole team, by the way, was cleared for top secret clearance with the military and working with this MK Ultra stuff. He was also working with this guy Becker, so it stands to reason Becker was also part of it.
Well, what?
Okay, did you catch how they were saying that they were working with radio waves too, a la brainwave entrainment? But at any rate, truth is stranger than fiction. It is. Next up, everybody's favorite cult leader, Charlie Manson. There's a lot going on with this guy, a lot that most people don't know, but he has some very direct links to the government and MK Ultra and LSD. And I'll go through it here. I've laid out a little bit of a timeline. I'll read it. Manson got out of prison in Kentucky and he went to California, and he had a parole officer there named Roger Smith, who was a doctoral student and was part of a federally funded research in LSD operating out of the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. Members of his team actually visited Manson's cult compound in L.A. And next, guess who shows up again? Jolin West. He worked directly with Smith and set up a fake hippie crash pad just a couple of doors away from the free clinic where he was having people come in and hang out. So there's Jolin West. There's Manson's parole officer, who has direct links to all kinds of LSD shit, and who actually went down and visited Manson's compound in the Los Angeles area. And then as shown earlier, West worked for Sidney Gottlieb, and there is a very direct connection there with MK Ultra itself. And then Manson, he supplied many music celebrities with, guess what, LSD. Manson lived with one of the Beach Boys for a while. The Beach Boys actually recorded one of his songs. Cass Elliot, and I've forgotten who else. There were a couple of really big names in the music industry at the time were actually going to testify for Manson at his trial. Cass Elliot backed out, though. Mama Cass, they called her. And who else was it? I forgot who it was. But this guy was not just the crazy nut that everybody tries to portray him as being. He knew people, and he was connected in the Hollywood music industry big time. Anyway, there we go. Jim Jones, People's Temple. A lot more to that than meets the eye. The 1977 Church Committee hearing showed that in the early 60s, lab research was abandoned in favor of field research for fear of getting caught, being exposed. In 1980, Joseph Holsinger, an aide to late Congressman Leo Ryan, who was murdered by the death squad at Jonestown, exposed the formation of eccentric religious cults by the CIA. Holsinger maintained that a CIA rear support base had been in collusion with Jones to perform medical and mind control experiments at the People's Temple. Of course, the press was blind to CIA allegations, but survivors of the carnage in Guyana followed the leads and maintained that Jim Jones was an employee, servant, agent, or operative of the Central Intelligence Agency from 1963 until 1978. Of course, 1963 was the year that they started forming cults and working with cults. It's interesting, right after all that happened, the mayor of San Francisco and Harvey Milk both ended up getting murdered and assassinated in a big bloodbath. I don't know if there's any connection, however, I've heard rumors to that effect. Now we're about to get seriously dark, and when you delve into this, you get an inkling of how venally evil this country is, what a beast it is, what it's become, if it wasn't already. But look up monarch mind control or monarch conditioning, and they named it after a butterfly. And just let me read you what it says here. It utilizes a combination of psychology and neuroscience to create within the victim an alter persona that can be triggered and programmed by the handlers. Mental dissociation enables the handlers to create walled-off personas in the subject's psyche, which can then be programmed and triggered at will. So what are they talking about here? They're talking about creating multiple personalities in people, split personalities, and then you take the newly created ones, you get in there with hypnosis and drugs and shit, and you take control of that one, and then you program some kind of a trigger word or phrase or action, which in turn will cause the alter personality to emerge, do whatever it is you want them to do, and then go back under again. And the poor slob that's been fucked over by the whole thing doesn't remember anything about it. It's usually done to children because children are the most susceptible. And it's a lot more common than you think. My sister knew these twin girls who'd been through that, and there was a trigger word, and all anybody had to do was say it, and next thing you know, they'd go into sex kitten mode. Anyway, the levels of monarch programming identify the victim's functions and are named after the EEG brainwaves associated with them. So here we're going back to brainwaves again. You've got beta, alpha, theta. The deepest one, delta here, supposedly, is if they can get you down into that state, they use you as a killer to murder people. The beta is more for sexual type shit. But ultimately, though, that's what it is. They're just creating multiple personalities in people. And the only way you can do that is through trauma, i.e. torture. Once, when former CIA Director William Colby was asked directly about it, they said, "What about Monarch?" He replied angrily, "We stopped at between the late 60s and early 70s. Okay, right there, the sumbitch admitted it. He admitted it right there. They said, "What about Monarch?" He said, "We stopped." Now, ask yourself this. Would any motherfucker who would do something like that in the first place tell you if they had really stopped or not? Would you believe them? Anyway, he ordered all the... When the church committee got wind of what was going on, they were going to pull back the curtain on the whole damn thing. Colby ordered all the records to be destroyed. There were some which survived. They were found that were, misplaced. Some, but not a lot. Naturally, of course, for very good reason. They didn't want anybody to know about this. The only details, really, that can be garnered from a lot of it are from testimony from the victims themselves. This is a snippet from a testimonial. On March 15, 1995, New Orleans clinical social worker Valerie B. Wolfe and two of her clients, Claudia S. Mullen and Christine Nicola Ebner, appeared before President Clinton's Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments in Washington, D.C. to testify on mind control experiments on children. You used to be able to find this thing fairly easily on the net. I had to get this off BitChute, and I haven't been able to find the whole thing. This is just a part of it, but let's go through here and listen to what this woman has to say.
All these experiments were performed on me in conjunction with mind control techniques and drugs in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Green was using me mostly as a mind control subject from 1966 to 1973. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin. The first significant memory took place at Kansas City University in 1966. Don Ebner took me there by plane when my mom was out of town. I was in what looked like a laboratory, and there seemed to be other children. I was strapped down, naked, spread eagle, on a table, on my back. Dr. Green had electrodes on my body, including my head. He used what looked like an overhead projector and repeatedly said he was burning different images into my brain while a red light flashed aimed at my forehead. In between each sequence, he used electric shock on my body and told me to go deeper and deeper, while repeating each image would go deeper into my brain, and I would do whatever he told me to do. You can see from this experiment that Dr. Green used trauma, drugs, post-hypnotic suggestion, and more trauma in an effort to gain total control of my mind. He used me in radiation experiments both for the purposes of determining the effects of radiation on various parts of my body and to terrorize me as an additional trauma in the mind control experiments. The rest of the experiments took place in Tucson, Arizona, out in the desert. I was taught how to pick locks, be secretive, use my photographic memory, and a technique to withhold information by repeating numbers to myself. Dr. Green moved on to wanting me to kill dolls that looked like real children. I was 4 years old.
So anyway, let's have us a blast from the past here. Let's take a look at some of these people. There's Lynette Fromm there. She was one of Manson's people, one of his cult. She tried to murder President Ford once. She stuck a gun right in his face, and the only thing that thwarted the whole thing was the gun jammed. And then here's Jack Ruby. We talked about him. His psychiatrist after he shot Lee Oswald was Joylyn West. All right, so here's connections there. But as far as Monarch is concerned, this guy here is the classic. Sirhan murdered Robert Kennedy. He said that a sexy woman in a polka dot dress lured him down into that kitchen where he was shot, Kennedy was shot. He said she pinched him on the shoulder, and he didn't remember anything till after it was all over with. It's classic, a classic trigger. I mean, assuming he's telling the truth, and I kind of think he is. Robert Kennedy's son thinks he is. And then here's this guy. He was a PhD student, a doctoral student. This guy had something to live for. But he shot up a theater in Aurora, Colorado, watching Batman. He had a psychiatrist that had all kinds of shady links to the military. He says he blacked out and doesn't remember anything till it's all over. So there you go. There's another aspect to all this shit that I'm not going to get into. I'm not going to cover it. Serial killers. It's needless to say, it's pretty dark. There's a book, though, if you want to get into it, called Programmed to Kill, The Politics of Serial Murder by David McGowan. And he goes in there and shows somewhat conclusively that a lot of these serial killers you see and hear about are linked to larger organizations, and then they also have links to, the government, the military, mind control shit. It's a dark, dark topic, and I don't know. This video's too long anyway. I'm not going to get into it. But anyway, there you have it. If you like my video, like and subscribe, and thank you for staying with it this long. I know it's going to be a long video, but I like to think that the information I'm conveying to you is worth your hearing, and I think it's worth seeing and saying. But anyway, Thank you very much. Bye.